My name is Dr. Robert Sarhan, and this is a YouTube video to meet President Donald Trump. Mr. President, I'm requesting an urgent meeting with you in the White House with 4 other victims where our parents have been murdered due to widespread corruption in our state, federal courts, and our government that is destroying the lives of millions of Americans every year and stealing our entire estates. I have studied and become an expert in guardianship crimes where my mother, Yvonne Sarhan, who was fully competent, was murdered with an overdose of Seroquel by a probate court judge, a group of attorneys, 2 guardians, and others. I have been involved in many other cases since then where these legal officials who swore to uphold the law and our Constitution have used the courts to operate a racketeering enterprise and are committing crimes of racketeering, extortion, fraud, and murder. I am speaking to you on behalf of millions of American citizens whose lives have been destroyed due to human trafficking and massive human rights violations. Probate court judges, attorneys, and guardians are ruling competent senior citizens incapacitated. Then the judge strips the senior citizens of their civil rights so they cannot fight back, where they have less rights than a murderer on death row. Then force the seniors to take a psychotropic drug called Seroquel, and use the Seroquel as a chemical restraint, where they're so drugged up, they cannot fight back. They can't even talk. Then the judge, attorneys, and guardians go in and steal their entire estates, generations of assets, 401ks, their Social Security money, their jewelry, their cars, and their homes. Then after everything is stolen, they put the elderly on about 1 dose of about 2,000 milligrams, which causes electrical conductivity disturbances in the heart and causes sudden cardiac death. My mother died of sudden cardiac death. Medicaid fraud. Once the person is stripped of the civil rights, the judge, attorneys, and guardians stop paying their health insurance premiums. They steal all the money, put the money in a repository account where the senior citizens and their families will never see this money again. They then show the seniors have no money and put them on Medicaid. This is Medicaid fraud, costing this country hundreds of billions of dollars per year. Also, the children are no longer allowed to see their parents, so the guardians can abuse them with these medications. They isolate our parents, they medicate our parents, and steal our estate. The mantra: isolate, medicate, steal the estate. I could not understand why I could not care for my mother. I am a medical doctor. I work for the Department of Justice. It was my mother's wishes for me to care for her, and it was my wishes to care for my mother, to give back to the best mother a guy could ever have. So I fought for my mother's freedom for 7 years before they killed her. And I hired lawyer after lawyer, and that my own lawyers lied to me, cheated me, and joined the other side, which is common in guardianship cases. So I was paying an attorney to fight for me, to fight for my mother's freedom. And the attorneys and guardians were using my mother's money to fight me. 2 other victims and myself, we joined together. We started investigating the guardians and attorneys. And what we found was that the guardian, in my case, brought her own attorney in to represent my mother and got her other attorney to represent her. To clarify, the guardian intentionally brought her attorney in to represent my mother so my mother would not have legal counsel or anyone fighting for her rights. These are severe constitutional rights violations. I then hired an appellate attorney. We appealed to the 3rd District Court of Appeals in Miami-Dade County. They ruled procurement, which means we're not going to change anything. So what you have here is 3 appellate judges that are corrupt and protecting the probate court judge. Mr. President, what we have is judges protecting judges protecting lawyers, and the federal judges are protecting the state judges when we take our case from the state into the federal court. And we also have bankruptcy judges that are working with federal and state judges to steal our properties and violating federal statutory law and our constitutional rights. If you go to the Judicial Qualifications Commission of Florida, or the Florida Bar, they do nothing. Please let me work with you to help you drain the swamp, since I'm an expert in these crimes. When we disqualify a judge and follow the judge, and the following judge gets the case, he calls the judge on the phone or walks across the hall and asks him who he wants him to win the case and what he wants them to do. For this corruption to take place, these judges are calling one another on the phone. Where my home of 26 years was stolen, worth $1 million, and my entire nest egg gone, with the signature of a judge's pen. The attorney for the other side, Raul Gastasi, called Judge Robin S. Rosenbaum in the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals in Georgia, who he went to school with, and she fixed the case. And Judge Beverly Martin and Judge Charles Wilson went along with fixing the case and made me and my family homeless. These judges must be terminated. We have documents to prove corruption, and we want to show you these documents. This corruption goes all the way into 11th Circuit Court of Appeals by Chief Judge Ed Carnes into the United States Supreme Court. The United States Constitution is gone. The judges and lawyers of this country have chipped away at our constitutional rights. I want to sit and show you that the judgment of foreclosure is void, and how state judges, and 2 federal judges, and 3 federal appellate judges are corrupt, and we're asking you to fire them and drain the swamp. To make this country great again, Mr. President, we must clean our courts, because these corrupt judges are destroying our lives through fraudulent rulings. Mr. President, the state and federal judges violate the Constitution daily. The U.S. Supreme Court and the legislators have granted judges immunity. That immunity has created an arrogance and disrespect to the American people, and mostly creating organized crime rackets in the 11th Circuit and throughout this country. I want to sit with you, Mr. President, and I want to show you a few documents to prove to you that the corrupt state court judges stole my home. I went into the federal court, and the federal judge, Gales, dismissed my case illegally and went outside the record in doing so. We appealed to 11th Circuit, where the 3-judge panel, Judge Robin S. Rosenbaum, Judge Beverly Martin, and Judge Charles Wilson, and Chief Judge Ed Carnes should be fired for racketeering, extortion, fraud, obstruction of justice, and many other federal crimes. We want these judges fired and given lengthy jail sentence for committing treason against our United States Constitution. Recently, on May 5th, 2020, Miss Genty Dursey was murdered in St. Petersburg, Florida. Miss Dursey was the owner of a hotel 1 block from the ocean in St. Petersburg, Florida. A real estate agent was trying to force her to sell. This real estate agent put Miss Dursey into a guardianship when she was fully competent in running her hotel, paying all her bills and doing her own taxes. She was illegally taken and kidnapped from her home and property, forced into a guardianship against her will, and within 6 months, the judge, attorneys, and guardians murdered her to sell her property worth millions. In Skender Hody's case, he tried to protect his mother, as I did. His mother's name was Gwendolyn Batson, and he hired an attorney named David Garten to fight for his mother's freedom. David Garten ended up immediately going against Skender and started working with the other side. David Garten charged Skender $67,000 in 3.5 months and did nothing. It did not submit any bills to the court, yet the court granted whatever he wanted. After Skender contacted me, I looked at the work that David Garten did. I estimate his work worth about $5,000, and he already paid him $35,000. Why I mention this case, because this was highly publicized in West Palm Beach, Florida, where Elizabeth Savage was appointed the guardianship by her husband, Judge Martin Colin, and she was going in and out of his courtroom and his colleague's courtroom, triple charging for guardianship fees. She ended up going to Skender Hody's house where Gwendolyn lived, and her attorney, Cheryl Hazeltine, and her broke down the door with a sledgehammer and stole all of Skender and Gwendolyn's property and personal belongings. And because the judge was involved, the police would do nothing. The attorneys are now threatening to take his home and property, and he needs urgent help. In another case in St. Petersburg, Florida, John Lo Bianca from New York called his father that had a winter home in St. Petersburg, Florida. He did not answer the phone. John got worried, got on a plane, and went down to see his father. When he knocked at the door, the people wouldn't answer the door. they wouldn't open the door. His father was put in a guardianship without the judge and attorneys contacting the family. What is more disturbing is that John had all the advance directives of his father. If something should ever happen to him, John hired numerous attorneys, spent $150,000 of his own money in less than 5 years. And they fought John and stole over $500,000, used John's father's money to fight him. His father was basically kidnapped, and the FBI would do nothing. In all these cases, the FBI does nothing. Even senators and congressmen turn a blind eye because when they need money, they go to these lawyers, and the lawyers steal it from our parents and our family estates. In the case of Landon Reed is an African-American young man that was 18 years old when he was put into the guardianship, and he's now 24. He was born blind, and the hospital gave the mother or the child a large sum of money to care for his needs. His biological mother's name is Patty Reed. Patty was totally devoted mother, and I became Landon's advocate. I seen that the court-appointed attorney was working with the other side to get Landon ruled incapacitated, to steal his money. Now they're stealing money from a blind child. Mr. President, after hearing the Guardian, even told me that Patty did an excellent job raising her child. The principal of his school where he graduated high school said that Patty did an excellent job raising her child. Her pediatrician of 18 years testified that Landon was fully competent and a very, very smart young man. Yet, he was put in a guardianship, and all his money is being stolen. Mr. President, please help bring Landon Reed home to his family. Barbara Stone took her mother to lunch and ended up in jail for 2 years. Barbara lived in New York. Her brother lived in Miami near her mother. The brother stole $750,000, isolated the mother, stopped her from speaking with Barbara on the phone because she would have told Barbara, "Your brother's stealing all my money." Barbara hired a lawyer in Miami, and her own lawyer lied to her and said, "Because you live in New York, you cannot be the guardian to protect your mother." This is untrue. She could have been the mother's guardian. Why this meeting is urgent? Because now the judges and attorneys have stolen $2 million from the mother. They isolated Barbara from her mother. Her mother died. And now the state and federal bankruptcy judges and attorneys are now stealing Barbara's estate. This is urgent matter, Mr. President. People have nowhere to turn. And lawyers and judges and legislators created laws to protect judges when they commit these crimes. This is racketeering at its best. The last one is Lisa Martino. Her father's still alive, who's in a guardianship in St. Petersburg. The last time that Lisa saw her father was April 30th, 2018. They refused to allow her to see her own father. They've already stole several hundred thousands of dollars from the father, and once the money runs out, they're going to put him on a toxic dose of Seroquel to kill him. We ask you to give us an urgent meeting within the next 10 days for you to assist us in saving the life of Mr. Martino. These crimes are very similar to the Cash for Kids in Pennsylvania, yet it took years to prosecute, and how many children's lives were ruined in families. And some of the children that were forced into jail, juvenile jails, where the judges were giving kickbacks. This is why it's called Cash for Kids. Former Judge Mark Ciaravella and Michael Conahan are just two of thousands of judges committing these crimes on a daily basis. We write complaints about these judges to the chief judge, appellate court, special counsel, and they throw it in the garbage. This is Mark Cervello from Pennsylvania. I will load these documents on the computer after I finish this video. After years of meeting with high-profile officials such as Hillary Clinton in 2008, and I asked her, please help me save my mother's life, she looked me in the eyes and said, I know all about these crimes. We have to do something about this. Of course I will help you. She gave me her card and told me to make an appointment for next week. I called her office immediately to make the appointment. The manager answered the phone and said, she's not going to help you. If you come to New York and knock on our door, we will have you arrested. As a result, my mother was murdered a year later. I wrote U.S. Attorney Orshan in Miami, Florida many times and would not even answer my certified letters. In November 2011, we all came from across the country to meet Senator Amy Klobuchar on these issues. She never showed up to the meeting. The FBI, I went to the FBI 17 times. I went to local police. I went to the FBI 17 times, they would do nothing. I went to local police, they said, we know there's a problem, but if the state attorney will not prosecute these judges, what do you want us to do? I met Michelle Obama in 2012. I told her what happened to my mother, and she really seemed to care. And thousands of mothers, I told her about thousands of cases across the country are happening every day in this country. I told her I need to meet with President Obama and told her that it's urgent before more people are killed and their states are being stolen. I gave her legal documents to support this widespread corruption. She promised me that she would look at these documents and get in touch with me. 6 days later, I received a generic letter, said nothing about what we talked about. A group of 9 went for help at a congressman's office in Miami, Florida. He refused to let anyone in the office, but allowed me to meet with him. I begged him to please help me save my mother's life and get her out of this fraudulent guardianship. He said, I'm not a plumber. I cannot fix your plumbing. Leave. I met the congressman's brother, who was also a congressman, and knew all about these crimes, but would do nothing to help my mother. We have written letters to you, Mr. President, Jared Kushner, William Barr, Joe Grogan, Juan Caro Rivera in your office, and they would do nothing. They did not even respond. We have Congressman Claude Pepper, who wrote in December of 1987 this document, which we'll bring to the White House, which is, it says abuses in the guardianship of the elderly and infirm, a national disgrace. This is in December of 1987. This is 40 years ago. 40 years ago, and these crimes continue because our congressmen and senators don't want to stop these crimes because they're getting a lot of kickbacks. This is a document from Mark D. Andrews that was written in 1997, 10 years later. It says, the elderly in guardianships, a crisis of constitutional proportion. Then the Government Accountability Office in Washington, D.C. on September 30th, 2010 wrote, guardianships, cases of financial exploitation, neglect, and abuse of seniors. We now realize that this is a fraternity among lawyers, and these lawyers become judges, senators, congressmen, and presidents. Judge John Malloy wrote a book called The Fraternity, Lawyers and Judges in Collusion. It's on Amazon. These lawyers have destroyed every part of our legal system. Lawyers that are part of a legislative branch of government. They have created laws to protect these judges and lawyers that are committing these crimes. We have the Judicial Qualification Commission that protects these dirty judges, and the Florida Bar protects these dirty lawyers. Mr. President, you are surrounded by lawyers that are lying to you about what is really happening in this country. We, the people, need an urgent meeting with you to help fix these life and death crimes against humanity. Unless you go through what we have went through, you cannot understand how to fix these problems. We want to abolish guardianship laws because they are unconstitutional. You cannot strip the people of their civil rights unless they commit a crime. My mom was only 72 years old, 72. and she was fully competent. I have also become an expert in foreclosure crimes due to a corrupt judge with widespread judicial corruption in the state and federal court as well, where the state and federal judges are committing crimes of racketeering, extortion, fraud, and stealing of properties from the American families. And these crimes lead all the way up until the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, where the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals are protecting these judges. We have a lawless society. Our local police, our state attorneys, our attorney general, our governor of Florida, our FBI, our congressmen and senators all have engaged in this corruption, all for the love of money. According to the Government Accountability Office, this is a $500 billion to $1 trillion a year crime in this country. I've also wanted the people of this country to know that we all have to stand together if we're going to fix this problem, because you could be next. The clause in the Fifth Amendment reads, "No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law." While the clause in the 14th Amendment says, "Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process." I was denied due process. I was put in the street. We're appealing now, and we're in the Supreme Court. This is corruption in every stage. When you appeal, these appellate judges are just as corrupt as the lower courts. Fraternity among lawyers. The laws that must be passed. No immunity for judges or anyone. No one is above the law. Immunity breeds corruption. Once an accusation is made about a judge, he must be put on suspension and be removed before doing more harm. Judges are not above the law. 20 years mandatory prison sentence for violation of constitutional rights, which is basically treason against our Constitution. When a judge violates the Constitution, he does it because he is dirty. End of story. There will be no ruling by an appellate court of per curiam. We pay thousands, $5,000, $10,000 for an appeal. We want to have an explanation of why the appellate court is ruling and the way that they're ruling. But they want to rule per curiam because they've been corrupted. We can prove this to you, Mr. President. We're going to bring our documents with you to show you. Clear cut. We want to abolish guardianship laws. They are unconstitutional. You can't strip people of their civil rights because they grow older. We have a list of federal and state judges we want to be fired for crimes of racketeering, extortion, fraud, and murder. We would like to present this list to you and show you how they committed these crimes and murdered tens of thousands of mothers and fathers per year throughout this country. President Trump, we want to share our knowledge with you because we do not believe for 1 second that you would allow our senior citizens to be abused, exploited, and murdered by probate court judges, attorneys, and guardians. We are American families whose lives have been destroyed due to human trafficking and massive human rights violations. Please invite us to the White House to work with you to drain the swamp before more fathers and mothers are murdered with medication. My name is Robert Sarhan, MD. My email is drrob2007@yahoo.com. I am requesting the American people to help this go viral. This is truly one of the most important subjects that you can talk about on this YouTube. When you go into the court and it's already fixed and you're spending your life savings fighting for justice, we have to clean our courts before it happens to you. Thank you so much, and God bless America.